They've become something of a lost art, but once upon a time, the pre-debut vignette was a very effective way for WWE to introduce a new character to their universe. In eras gone by, fans would get a taste of a new gimmick through a series of short videos that played over the course of several weeks or even months. Some of these vignettes are now considered legendary in and of themselves, but we've covered those already, so it's only fair we take a look at the ones that were legendarily bad. I'm Sam Driver from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE debut vignettes. Join us! Number 10. Thurman Plug. The WWE's New Generation era had its positives, mostly Bret Hart, but the early to mid-90s were responsible for some of the downright cheesiest material that's ever aired on WWE television. And Thurman Sparky Plug was up there with the very corniest. Played by the man who would go on to have much more success as Hardcore Holly, old Thurman Plug was a neon-soaked race car driver who was just so gosh darn excited to come to the WWF, by golly! Robert Howard had actually done some racing and even won the 1993 International Speedway in Mobile, Alabama. So, in an era of occupational gimmicks, that's the one he was given. Which is all well and good, but the trouble was WWE wanted him to be a smiling, charismatic babyface who loved the fans, while in real life the man himself only smiled at the misfortune of others and only loved roughing up rookies. Thus, they rang false. Holly didn't like doing the vignettes, which featured the line, "My name's Thurman Plug, but my friends can call..." My name's Thurman Plug, but my friends call me Sparky, and you can call me Sparky too! But he was hardly going to turn down the gig, lame as it may have been. Number 9. The Stalker. One of WWE's, or at least Vince McMahon's, big things when acquiring a piece of talent that had already been successful elsewhere was to remake them in his own image. Which is why you had the American Dream Dusty Rhodes transform into a polka dot wearing common man, and Diamond Dallas Page as a stalker lusting after The Undertaker's wife. Speaking of stalkers, WWE's big idea for Barry Windham when he returned for another WWE run in 1996 was to make him the Stalker. Only he wasn't going after a top star's wife, but rather stalking his prey in the woods. Not even something impressive like a bear or Bigfoot, but rabbits and deer and that kind of stuff. This whole thing came about because Windham had mentioned that he liked the outdoors during a meeting, while the new camouflage outfit was Vince's way of covering Big Baz up after his weight had ballooned. As far as the vignettes were concerned, they were silly and cheap and utterly unconvincing, because most wrestling fans realized that the Stalker was Barry Windham in some daft face paint. Windham self-admittedly couldn't figure out how to play the character, something that certainly came across in his pre-debut vignettes. Number 8. Steven Regal. Moving out of the New Generation and into the Attitude Era of the late 90s, WWE programming may have been altogether a lot edgier, but it could still also be really naff. Take The Real Man's Man, which was WWE's bright idea for Steven Regal, as a glowing example. Once a blue-blooded English snob, Regal was now a hard-nosed, blokey bloke who did super manly things like chop down trees, mix concrete, operate heavy machinery, and shave with a straight razor. Hell, the grizzled bastard even squeezed his own orange juice and then drank it all down, including the pulp. These scenes played out as a voiceover emphasized just how manly these feats were, as Regal, strung out on drugs and in no fit state to be doing much of anything at the time, did his best to look as manly as possible. Yes, they were tongue-in-cheek and clearly spoofing stuff like the brawny paper towel lumberjack guy, but that doesn't necessarily make them good, does it? Regal himself later noted that he hated doing the man's man gimmick, which he called truly ridiculous. Number 7. Ludwig Borger. We've seen plenty of foreign menace heels in WWE over the decades, from sneaky salt-throwing Japanese villains to Middle Eastern boogeymen. One of the most puzzling, however, was Ludwig Borger, who, based on his introductory vignettes, was an apparent environmentalist from Finland of all places. At the same time that Lex Luger was being built up as the all-American hero, the Hellraiser from Helsinki attacked the US of A by pointing out poverty, neglect, and flaws in the country's social system. The bastard! I hope the total package makes him pay dearly for this. Not Not only was this a somewhat weak way to get heat on a heel, but the way the vignettes themselves were produced left a lot to be desired. A single shot with no music while Tony Hallomer talked in his very monotone, heavily accented way was hardly thrilling stuff for the man WWE had envisioned as their version of Ivan Drago. In an era where vignettes, good or bad, routinely showed a lot of imagination and creativity, the ones hyping the impending arrival of Borga were strangely lacking in both. Number 6. Men on a Mission. The massive new generation tag team of Men on a Mission weren't everybody's cup of tea, but they were undoubtedly impressive in their own way and got over big in time. Which is a testament to them really, because Mabel, Oscar and Mo's introductory vignettes were absolutely awful. A lot of stuff from that time has aged about as well as your average pair, as the early to mid-90s had a very particular aesthetic and vibe. And that aesthetic and vibe were on full display for MOM's vignettes, which featured rapping frontman Oscar spitting some lukewarm rhymes while the three of them collectively stood in front of a green screen that showed generic footage of an inner city. MTV was all the rage back then, in case you weren't aware, and this was exactly what a bunch of middle-aged white dudes who work for a professional wrestling organization based in Stamford, Connecticut would assume the kids were down with. That's what the kids say, isn't it? Down with? Did I get that right? Anyway, the vignettes were whack. Again, that's what the kids say, isn't it? When they should have been both dope and fly. Number 5. Kizani. Whenever a prospective talent is hoping for a call-up from the developmental system to the main show, they'll typically say yes to whatever gimmicks pitched to them, even if they were secretly dying inside at the thought of it. Sin Bodhi had that sinking feeling when Vince McMahon told him he was going to play an old-school Carney who spoke Carney and was called Kizani, which is Carney for Carney. Good lord. Bodhi can't have felt any better about his prospects when the vignettes for the character began to air on SmackDown either. The 30-second spot saw Kizani go about his Carney business while speaking in Carney slang the entire time, apart from the beginning and end when he would say the killer catchphrases, "My name is Kizani" and "I am Kizani." 1 million t-shirts were sold. These vignettes ran for an age and only served to make Kizani, the supposed babyface, come across as incredibly annoying, which is something you very much do not want for your supposed babyface to be. Tis Otal Bazolics as if Yazoo is Ask Mazee. Number 4. Emelina. Kizani may have been a lot of hype for very little payoff, but it paled in comparison to the debacle that was Emelina. Lovable NXT standout Emma had been on the main roster for about a minute when she suffered a back injury that required surgery, presenting WWE with the perfect opportunity to give her a fresh coat of paint upon her return. In October of 2016, vignettes began teasing the makeover of Emma to Emelina. No longer a somewhat goofy plain Jane, Emma was now going to be gorgeous, captivating, irresistible, glamorous. Yes, these were all words that literally showed up on the screen during her vignettes, which comprised of little more than professional modeling photos WWE had taken of Tennille Dashwood laid over the top of some grating dance pop music. Not only were the vignettes really poor, they went on for an eternity, which was seemingly an inside joke. The kicker? After literal months of these teasers and at least one scrap debut, Emelina announced that she was reverting back to Emma during her one and only appearance as Emelina, reportedly because WWE felt she couldn't pull off the whole sex kitten thing. Cue the Emma vignettes. Number 3. Michelle McCool. Michelle McCool first showed up on WWE screens all the way back in 2004 as a contestant on the Diva Search. Though she didn't win the competition, McCool was signed to a deal anyway and did this and that while the creative team figured out what to actually do with her. A roaming fitness trainer helping SmackDown stars to stretch wasn't it, and neither was playing the sexy teacher-manager of Casey James and Idol Stevens. No, what they really needed was to find the essence of Michelle McCool. What made her tick? Just who was she? What did Michelle McCool really enjoy doing? Turns out, Michelle McCool simply loved life. Yes, it didn't matter if it was running on the beach, swimming in the sea, or rollerblading, or even more leisurely pursuits like shopping for clothes, because if it was life, then McCool was loving it, as we all found out via an insufferable series of vignettes that ran on the Blue brand in 2007. Look, I get that they were trying to market her as the all-American girl, and getting her into a bikini or a pair of really small and tight white shorts was paramount for the time, but the vignettes were a whole load of nothing. Number 2. Hirohito. In 2004, WWE had a very bad idea. I mean, the company had a lot of bad ideas in 2004, but this one was very, very, very bad indeed. And while the idea never came to fruition after cooler heads prevailed, well, at least one cooler head, the fact that it got as far as it did means that we simply have to include it here. Hirohito was the original name and gimmick for Kenzo Suzuki, who was going to debut on the Raw brand as a top-level heel pegged for a program with then World Heavyweight Champion Chris Benoit. And if the name Hirohito sounds familiar, it might be because you're a history buff and know that Emperor Hirohito ruled Japan during World War II. And if it didn't sound familiar to fans when this vignette aired on the April 19th, 2004 edition of Raw, well, WWE were going to give you a very quick history lesson with a bunch of stock footage and a menacing voiceover. It was, let me stress again, a very, very, very bad idea that could have done WWE some serious reputational damage in a major market had Suzuki not refused to do it. And as it is, it was simply one of the most ill-conceived vignettes in the promotion's history. And number 1, Beaver Cleavage. When Headbanger Thrasher went down with an injury, his tag partner Mosh finally got the chance to fly solo. To fly solo directly into the sun, that is, because the gimmick he was given was a potential career killer. Repackaged as Harry Beaver Cleavage, this new, wholly lamentable character was introduced via a series of black and white vignettes that parodied 1950s sitcom Leave It to Beaver. Harry Cleavage was presented as an overgrown man-child who, through a series of hammer-blow subtle sexual innuendos, it transpired had a thing for his own mother, the voluptuous Mrs. Cleavage. Craving mother's milk and finding comfort in her bulging bosom, Beaver Cleavage would wiggle his eyebrows when looking directly into the camera to let the audience know that all these mishaps were actually intentional. Unsurprisingly, these hilarious vignettes did not lead to a sustained run on TV, and the character was scrapped after just a single match. Mosh later noted that beyond the vignettes and the match, he didn't know where the Beaver Cleavage character was gonna go. And to that we can answer, in the toilet, Mosh. The answer was always in the toilet.